Hello there, how are you doing? Welcome back to my channel. This is Raymond from Friends and Daves. So 4 months ago, I created this interactive drop-down box that allows you to click on a drop-down, select an option, and it automatically collapses, right? So today, I'll be showing us how to create this same drop-down box, but this time using variable interactions, right? So looking at the previous design, you see that we have these components states here, and we also have this drop down box component, and it's basically one drop down that is being duplicated several times to create the different states, right? But in this case, we're going to be transferring all of these multiple duplicates into a simplified version with just the button and a drop down using variables, and we should be able to create the same features that we want. All right, so let's get down to it. So first of all, let's look at the steps we'll take. It's very important that you follow these steps because of the way variable works in Figma. Sometimes you may not get the results you want if you don't follow a particular way. As a disclaimer, I actually tried this concept several times before I was able to arrive to a particular process that's made it to work. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is to create the variables, then we're going to create the buttons, the drop down icons, then we're going to link the variables to the drop down elements before creating the interactions. All right, now as a rule of thumb, it's important that you pay attention to how the names are structured. Of course, you can name your layers the way you want, but it's important to know what layer name you're giving each of the frames, so that when you're doing your interactions, you'll be sure of what you're doing. And also pay attention to the way the frames are organized, because Figma is very meticulous about the interactions that is applied to the frame. So if you apply the interaction to the wrong frame, you will not get the results that you want. All right, so lastly, you pay attention to where the interactions are applied. Okay, so first thing first that we want to do is we have this preview area, and this is where we're going to work. But before we start our work, we have to create our variables, right? So why none of your artboard is clicked, right? You will see these local variables, right? If this is your first time, I'll just give you a quick walk through how to create your variables item, right? So you click on this variable button here, it will bring up this dialog where you have all your variables. At the moment, I have this particular one, but for this tutorial, I'll create a new collection. All right. However, let me just give you a brief of what is going to be on the collection. So we have our text, all the text we want to replace on each time a user clicks an item, and also we have the colors applied to the text or the background of the button. Then we have two icon states, to show icon and to hide icon. Is very important. All right, so click on this drop down here and you click create collection, so you can create a new collection. So you can call it new drop down, right? So inside here we can create different kinds of variables. At the moment, we just have 4 types of variables: colors, numbers, strings. Mostly what we're going to be working with is strings, boolean, and colors. Strings are text, right? So I want to create a drop down where a user can select different types of job type, right? So be design, products, engineering, right? So we give it a name, so give it a design. Then in this case here, we can call this roles. So for the design, we have maybe a product designer, right? Then you can click here again and click strings. Then we have on products, we have product manager. All right, so you repeat the same process to create the other ones. So we go again, let's say on data, we have data scientists. All right. So if you want to duplicate this an existing variable without clicking here, you can just click on it, hold down your shift on your keyboard, and you press the return key. Automatically edit that, right? So for engineer, let's say we have chief technical officer. All right, last one, we have Amy in CRM. So we have customer service manager. Okay, now these are the 5 different roles available for the company, but however, before a role is selected, there should be a default value, right? So we create that and call it default. So we can name the default choose a role, choose your role. All right, now we have all of our tests ready. So we can, if you select the first one, hold down your shift and select the last one, we can group all of them by right clicking and group. So we call this one, double click on it, call it test. All right, now we want to create a boolean, right, for icon. So the first one should be show icon and the state should be yes, right? So we can select this again, hold down your shift, hit your return key to duplicate. So we name this hide icon and the default should be false. All right, so we can group this also and name it, double click on the name and call it icons, icon states, something that will help you recognize what it is. All right, so the last part is to create the colors. So here we have the first color, which is the background color, which is white, so we leave it at that. Then we have this hover stroke. So the hover color when our button is being hovered on, so we'll use this color. All right, so the next one is the default stroke color, which is also white. So we call this let's say white or default stroke. I like to do this so that the shape and size of the button remains the same throughout the design, right? Okay, the last one we want to have is the text color, right? So the button label color, text color. So this will also be the same as the hover stroke color here. Okay, so we can select this, then we group them together, double click on the name and call these colors. So now we are ready to create our components and apply all of these variables to those components. All right, so we can close this. You can always access these variables by clicking on this variable icon here to open variables, right? Now let's go to our artboard. So quickly, we're going to use our auto layout, our text tool to choose your role. Now you can name this anything, right? So you can name it button text here. Doesn't matter. Once you apply your variables, it will update, right? So we can turn this to auto layout by pressing Shift A, right? So we name this button. Then we can apply, let's say 10 by 10 padding on all sides. You can use 8 corner radius. Now we can quickly apply our colors. So we have our background color, then also we can change our text color. You see that? So then we can also add a stroke color, but in this case by default we use a default stroke color. Code is not visible because it's the same as that of the button background, right? So for the purpose of this class, we'll just keep the regular font Roboto and 14 pixels font size, right? So now we can before we turn this into a component, right? So what we will do is we're going to add an icon. So we'll use fader icon plugin, right? So we are going to add the chevron down and the chevron up icons, right? So we can double click on it, it comes to the click on it, it also comes there, right? But it's black color, so you won't see it. So what we're going to do is select these two icons, remove the spacing on it because we want to make it very small, right? So we can reduce the size to 12. All right. So once you are done, copy or cut the icon, click on your button, paste it inside. All right. Now, what we're going to do is this button text, we're going to change this from whole contents to field container, so that whenever there's extra space, it will take up the space available, right? So what we're going to do now is by default these two icons will be visible, so we are going to select this first icon and we are going to go to the layout. On the layout section here, see the transparency is 100, right? On this eye icon, right click on it and you will see your new drop down to icon state. So you see hide icon, select it, right? Select the next one, right click on the eye icon, then you select hide icon. So now you have applied that icon state variable to those two icons, and because the default value of the hide icon is false, that's why it's not visible. All right, so now we are ready to turn this into a component. So click on this create component, right? So once you create a component, you also click on create variable, right? So you have a variant here, and we can rename this variant to hover, right? Now that we have this, I always like to turn the entire button into an auto layout so it's easy for me to adjust the content. So now we have this, we can change the stroke color of this hover to the hover stroke, right? Hover stroke, which is black. All right, so now that we have this basic state of the button, the next thing we want to do is to create the list of the items we want to select. So what we are going to do is copy or an instance of this button. You can do that by holding down your option or alt key on your keyboard, then drag an instance outside. Now pay attention to this. We are going to add this button inside an auto layout frame, right? So we can do that by right clicking and click add auto layout. So don't add an auto layout by automatically Figma adds this padding, but we are going to remove the entire padding, right? So we can rename this layout to label. So what happens is that we have this label auto layout with the button inside. Now this button is going to maintain whatever feature function we have added here, right? Now the next step is to add this label element inside a list frame or a list auto layout, which will hold all of the items or all of the labels, right? To do that, we can add an auto layout to it, or because there's an existing auto layout, you can't add it by clicking right click. So what you can do, just click on the label and use Shift A. Automatically it adds another auto layout on top of the existing auto layout. So we can name these to items. All right, now let's change the background to background color. Then we can change the radius to 16. Now I'm using 16 because the button already has 16 pixels, right? And I always like to maintain that consistency, so that the padding for this particular item frame is 8. So 8 plus 8 is 16, right? So we can turn this corner radius to 16 so that you have that consistent structure. All right, so the next step is to now duplicate this into different number of sections or items you need, which is 5. We have created 5 variables, right? So we can make this 5 of them. Okay, now we'll use this item to create our drop down. But first of all, let's create the default state of the drop down. So we can copy this same button again, add an auto layout on it, then rename it to collapsed, because by default the drop down is collapsed, right? We can remove the padding. All right, now we can also duplicate this and rename this to expand. All right, now all we have to do is come back to this section here, right? Now open it, open the collapse section, select the button, open the button, select the down arrow, remove the variable applied, turn it on. You can decide to add the show icon variable, right? Then you do the same for this particular one, but in this case now we want to show the up icon, right? So right click on it, then show icon. This way you see that this icon shows. So when I apply an interaction, you see it changing correctly. All right, now that we have this button and we have this list, we can select this one, hold down shift, select this one, then add an auto layout on it. So when we add an auto layout to it, we can name this expanded. All right, so we can decide to make this 5 or 10 just to add a little space in between them. So one thing you notice is that the size of this body and the size of this body is different, right? So what we can do is we can remove this padding that is on this body of these items, right? So we can remove the left and right padding, and you see we have this nice structure here. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that the size of the item is big enough to contain our items, but we'll leave it for now, and when we add the variables, we'll see the size of the items. All right, so what we have to do now is select this one, hold down your shift, select it collapsed, then open the components icon and click create component sets. Right, so now we have our drop down components, so we can rename these to drop down. Right, we can turn it to auto layout too. So now we have the collapse states and we have the drop down. So we have created our components, we have created our variables. It's now time to link those variables to these components. Right, the first thing we want to do is to link the default state of the variable into this button text. So you can select this button, hold down your shift and your command or control key, click on the next one to select both of them, right? So on the text panel here, you will see a variable icon, right, that says applies variable. So when you click apply variable, you can go down to new drop down that we created and you choose the default, right? So we say default. Automatically it applies it to the entire component because all of this was created from this button component. right? So now what we want to do next is to change each of these drop down items to each individual variables. So we can select the first one, repeat the same step, design. Second one, the same step, product manager. So to select the text itself is very easy to do. Just hold down your command or control key and click on the text, right? So you can go here, apply this to data scientist, go here, apply this to chief technical officer. It's there because of the size of the frame, it has broken down to the next line, and we don't want that to happen. All right, so we can set this other one to the last one, which is customer service manager. All right, so now to solve our problem with this what we can do is select the entire expanded state, hold down your shift, select this collapse state, then we can increase the size, so we can make it a fixed width like 180. All right, so by default nothing changes, right? But what we can do is click down into to select the nested elements, then change it to fill container. All right, so you see that. Then what we can do also, select the content inside, change it to fill container. Okay, let's see how that works. See that? So we'll be able to add that extra space there, but you see that the last one is still the same. So we can increase this to 184 and save it to solve it. We can make this, we can add it extra 12, and now we have what we want. So now we can quickly just make this fill container, and that is it. So this is 196. All right, so now that we have our items linked, the next one now is to also bind each of these elements to the variables. So the first step we are going to take is click on this variables. Okay, so what we do is let's copy this instance. So we can copy this instance, we'll put it on the preview here. So now that whatever we're going to be doing, we can be previewing it to be sure it's working correctly. So we can paste it here, and we now have an instance of the drop down. So right now, if you go here and you click on it, nothing happens because there is no interaction yet. All right, so the first thing we want to do for the interaction is go to the prototype state, then click and drag to the hover state, and you apply while hovering smart animate, right? Easy out 300. Just leave it by default. No change. There's no need to change anything. Of course, you can go ahead and play around with it to get your preferred animation. So now if you go here, you can see it's hovering, right? Great. Now the next step we want to take is to quickly go to this panel. So this is where you want to pay attention to the steps that I'm taking. So I'm selecting the collapse state, not the button inside the collapse state. The collapse state is what I'm selecting. So you click on the collapse state, click on interaction. So, and you say that on click, set variable, right? So we want to set our default variable to default variable. All right. So that means that this collapse state default variable for the text is set to default, right? Now for the expand state, the expand, not expanded, the expand, which is this smaller button on top here, right? We want to set it to interaction, the same thing, set the default to default, right? Okay, that is done. Now the next step you want to take is this. You want to select the collapse state, then select the button inside the collapse state, and you drag it to the expanded state. That way it adds that on click, change to the expanded state. Now I noticed that if you remove this interaction and you add, so instead of dragging from here to here, if you add it, if you click on this button and add change to expanded, it doesn't select the expanded. Somehow, I'm not sure why it happens, but it doesn't work, right? So when you click on expand, it go back to the collapse state. So which means that it won't work, right? So the only solution that I figured is to drag it to that state, and automatically it's applied that on click, it will change to this state. Now the next step is select the expand state, then select the button inside the expand state. Then repeat the same step, drag it to the collapse state. That way, when you click on this button, it collapses. Now let's try out our interaction. So if I click on it, you see expands. If I click on it, it collapses. See that? It works like magic. Okay, so you see that we have an issue here that there is no space between the edge of these items, and that's because we removed the padding. So we are going to add that back. That was an obvious misstep. So we're going to add back these 8 pixels. So we go back here. Okay, hold on. Yeah, you see this is a lot better. Okay, so the next step you want to take is, now when you click on any of these, nothing happens, right? So the next step you want to take is what we can do also is see that this last one has collapsed also. So what we can do is select this back also, then maybe add 8 pixels here, or extra 8. Okay, this is good. So 2 4 2 1 2. Okay, all right. So what we want to do now is select the item. Remember, when we were creating this item list, we added a label layout, right, that houses the button. So you don't want to select the button, you want to select the label. So when you select the label, go to your prototype, click on interaction, then on click, set variable. So we want to set the default variable to the product designer, right? So set variable, set variable is the action, right? So what is the target? You want to change the target, which is the default text, choose a course, choose a role, right? You want to change it to product design. On click. Now you can add an extra interaction by clicking this plus button. So when you click on plus, you can say set change to. So once you change to, when you click on it, it should collapse. Then you can click on it, smart animate. Right? Now let's see that's working here. So when we click on this, you see everything is working. Then when you click on this, it collapses. But however, the default text changes to product designer. All right. So now that we have this working, we can quickly copy this interaction and apply it to all other items. So to do that, you click just beside the interaction, then you can Ctrl C or Command C on your keyboard. Then now you can select other labels elements. Remember, you are selecting the label, not the button inside the label. Now you click Command V or Ctrl V to paste that interaction. All right, so what you want to do now is to go back to each of the interaction quickly and change the destination text to each of the elements. So this is product manager, right? So the next one is data scientist. So change this to data scientist. All right. So the next one is chief technical officer. So change this to engineer. All right. Then the last one is CRM. Okay, so now we have all of our functions. Now you don't have to actually change any of this. So what we need to do now is to test it out to see if it's working, right? So you see by default you have choose your row, and you can click on it. You can click on it to collapse over and over again. Then you can click on this to select it, click on this to select it. So what is happening here is that because the default is data scientist, but if I click on chief technical officer, it changes to chief technical officer, because I told it that on interaction, I told you that when I click on this button, and wherever you see the default text, change it to engineer. And engineer, the text on engineer is chief technical officer. So that way you can quickly create the same drop-down interaction without duplicating multiple elements on your screen. So you see that what we have here is just the button and the drop-down. Now, is this better than the previous process? Personally, I prefer this because it gives your work more clean space. There's not much elements going around. It makes it easy to track what is happening. However, because the interaction is not visible, it's important that when you're communicating how the dropdown works, you explain to whoever you're working with how the variable functions. And if you're handing off your design to another designer or to an engineer, it would be great to add maybe a video walkthrough or document the steps that it takes to achieve your results. I hope this video was helpful. Share it with your friends and see you next time. Bye bye.